The knife was at Amara's throat before she even registered, the door splintering open. "Did you really think," Lord Cassius Blackwell whispered, his breath hot against her ear, "that a piece of paper would save you from me?" 20 minutes earlier, she'd been a married woman. 20 minutes earlier, she'd had hope. Now she had a blade kissing her jugular and the sinking realization that desperation made terrible decisions look brilliant until they got you killed. Her brand new husband, the stranger she'd paid 600 gold pieces and knew only as Cale Rivers, stood frozen 3 feet away, his dark eyes calculating distances and odds. The morning sun streaming through the chapel windows caught the marriage certificate still clutched in the priest's trembling hands, the ink barely dry. "Let her go, Blackwell." Cale's voice was flat, neutral, the kind of calm that preceded violence. "You have no claim here. The marriage is legal." Blackwell laughed, a sound like glass breaking slowly. "Legal? My dear boy, legality is determined by whoever has the most dangerous friends." He pressed the knife harder. Amara felt a warm trickle down her neck. "And I'm afraid your wife's poor judgment has made this situation rather terminal." The priest whimpered. Blackwell's 2 guards blocked the only exit, looking like men who'd done this before and would sleep soundly afterward. Amara met Cale's eyes. She tried to convey an apology for the ambush, for dragging a stranger into her nightmare, for being stupid enough to think a fake wedding could outsmart a real monster. What she saw in his gaze made her breath catch. Not fear. Not calculation. Recognition. And something that looked an awful lot like a sleeping wolf waking up. "Actually," Cale said softly, "I think you're going to find that your friends aren't nearly dangerous enough." Then the stranger she'd married started moving, and Amara realized she'd accidentally hired something far more terrifying than a simple laborer. 16 hours earlier. The night Cale Thorne died, he was drinking cheap wine in a tavern that smelled like regret and old cheese. At least, that's what the kingdom believed. The official story, carried by ravens to every corner of the realm, was that Alpha King Cale Thorne, the Silver Wolf of the North, had been poisoned at his own coronation feast. Very dramatic. Very permanent. The kind of death that made excellent fodder for tragic ballads and gave his enemies exactly what they wanted, a power vacuum. The reality was far less poetic and significantly more inconvenient. Cale had survived the assassination attempt by the slimmest of margins, 1 loyal guard, a secret passage, and an escape route that deposited him directly into a manure cart. Nothing says divine right to rule, quite like tumbling through a palace window into fermented horse excrement. The poison had left him weakened, his wolf temporarily dormant, stripped of the supernatural strength that had made him legendary. For 3 months, he'd been living as a common laborer in the border town of Greywater, a place so unremarkable that even its own residents forgot it existed. He'd chosen the name Cale Rivers because he lacked imagination when concussed and actively dying. He worked construction during the day, kept his head down, healed slowly, and waited for his wolf to wake. The irony wasn't lost on him. The most powerful alpha in 5 generations reduced to hammering nails and pretending he couldn't smell the treason that had infected his court from miles away. His uncle, Duke Varen, had made his move swiftly after the death. Named regent for Cale's non-existent heir, Varen had begun consolidating power with the subtlety of a battering ram. Meanwhile, Cale's loyal generals were either imprisoned on fabricated charges or scattered to the winds. His return needed to be perfectly timed, premature, and he'd be a weakened king walking into a slaughter. Too late, and there'd be no kingdom left to reclaim. So he waited. And drank cheap wine. And tried not to murder his landlord, who had opinions about everything and the self-awareness of a brick. The tavern tonight was its usual portrait of small-town despair, drunks nursing their failures, a barmaid who'd stopped pretending to care sometime around the 3rd ale, and a musician in the corner playing a lute like he was personally angry at it. Cale had claimed his regular corner table, the one with a clear view of both exits and enough shadow to discourage conversation. Then she walked in. Even in Greywater's dim lighting, she was impossible to miss. Not because she was dressed for attention, her cloak was plain, her hood drawn, but because she moved through the tavern like someone walking through enemy territory with a map and a death wish. Purpose and desperation made interesting bedfellows, and this woman was clearly sleeping with both. She scanned the room with the intensity of someone conducting a very specific interview process. Her gaze passed over the drunks, the merchants, the day laborers, and landed on Cale with the precision of an arrow finding its target. He knew that look. He'd seen it on soldiers' faces before suicide missions. This woman had decided something, made peace with something, and was now simply executing the plan with whatever dignity she could muster. She crossed to his table, sat down without invitation, pushed back her hood to reveal features that would have been called aristocratic if she'd been smiling and haunted given her current expression. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes the color of storm clouds, and the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from being afraid for too long. "I need a husband by tomorrow," she announced, her voice steady despite the insanity of the statement. "You need money. I'm offering 500 gold pieces for 2 hours of your time." Cale stared at her. In his 3 months of hiding, he'd dealt with thieves, con artists, one memorable marriage proposal from his landlord's daughter, and a man trying to sell him a genuine dragon egg that was clearly a painted rock. This was new. "Are you drunk?" "Desperately sober." She placed a coin purse on the table between them. It landed with a heavy thunk of serious money. "Are you interested?" The pause stretched. Somewhere in the tavern, someone broke a glass. The barmaid yelled about credit. The drunk with the lute transitioned into an off-key ballad about a mermaid with questionable morals and negotiable virtue. Cale studied the woman across from him. Beneath the desperation, there was steel. Beneath the fear, there was intelligence. And beneath the ridiculous proposal, there was a story he suddenly wanted to hear. "Define husband," he said. Relief flashed across her face so quickly he almost missed it. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. "My name is Amara Linwood. In 3 days, my father is forcing me to marry Lord Cassius Blackwell." Have you heard of him? Cale had. Everyone had. Blackwell was a piece of work, wealthy, titled, and notorious for the accidents that befell anyone who displeased him. His last 2 wives had died under mysterious circumstances. The kind of mysterious that involved stairs and bathtubs and investigators who'd clearly been paid to develop sudden blindness. More relevant to Cale's current situation, Blackwell was one of Duke Varen's inner circle. One of the vultures feeding on the kingdom's corpse while pretending to mourn. I've heard. Then you understand why I'd rather marry literally anyone else. Amara's hands twisted together under the table. Here's the situation. If I run, he'll find me. Blackwell has resources, connections, hunters. A woman alone on the road is vulnerable. But a married woman legally bound to another man, that changes everything. The betrothal contract becomes void. He can't claim a wife who belongs to someone else. So you need a wedding. Fast. Quiet. And temporary. Exactly. She met his eyes. I have a priest willing to perform the ceremony at dawn tomorrow, discreet, bribable, asks no questions. We marry, sign the certificate, file it with the town registrar. After that, we part ways. You take your payment and disappear. I disappear to my mother's family estate in the south. We never see each other again. It was, Cale admitted, not the worst plan he'd heard. Desperate, yes. Built on legal technicalities and hope, absolutely. But there was a certain elegant simplicity to it. What she couldn't know, was that she'd just offered a dead king 600 gold pieces to sign a marriage certificate. That the signature she was buying belonged to someone who had very personal reasons to destroy everyone in Blackwell's circle. That the stranger she was hiring had spent 3 months planning his own resurrection. Make it 600, Cale said. I have expenses. Amara's laugh sounded like breaking glass and desperate hope. Done. They shook on it. Her hand was cold, her grip surprisingly strong. Dawn tomorrow, she repeated. The old chapel on Mill Street. Don't be late. Wouldn't dream of it. Cale pocketed the advance payment she offered, 100 gold pieces, earnest money. One question. Why me? Amara stood, pulling her hood back up. "You look like someone who's survived worse than a fake wedding. And unlike everyone else in this tavern, you don't look like you'd sell me out for the price of another drink." She left before he could respond, moving through the tavern with the same desperate purpose she'd entered with. Cale sat alone in his corner, turning the gold piece over in his fingers, thinking about fate and its very dark sense of humor. He'd been hiding for 3 months, waiting for his wolf to wake, waiting for the right moment to strike back at the men who'd tried to kill him. And now a desperate noblewoman had just walked into his life and handed him a direct connection to Duke Varen's inner circle on a silver platter. The wolf, dormant for months, stirred in his chest. Just a flutter. A hint of recognition. As if it, too, found this situation darkly amusing. Cale drained his wine and stood. He had a wedding to prepare for. Across town, in a mansion that reeked of old money and new corruption, Lord Cassius Blackwell received a message from one of his informants. The Linwood girl had been seen in a tavern, speaking with a stranger. Suspicious. Worth investigating. Blackwell smiled and began sharpening his knives. The pieces were moving into position. Dawn was coming. And neither Amara nor Cale realized they'd just signed a contract written by fate with a very dark sense of humor and an appreciation for irony that bordered on malicious. The wedding was scheduled for dawn. It was going to be memorable. Chapter 2: Vows and Violence. The chapel on Mill Street looked like it had given up on religion sometime around the last plague and decided to pursue a career in aggressive decay. The roof sagged. The windows were mostly broken. The single remaining pew had woodworm and existential doubts about its structural integrity. It was, in other words, perfect for a wedding that neither party wanted discovered. Cale arrived 15 minutes early, which was his habit for everything from breakfast to potential ambushes. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped the building like a shroud, which felt appropriately ominous given the circumstances. He dressed in his least-stained shirt, combed his hair with his fingers, and tried to look like someone who hadn't recently survived assassination by a palace defenestration into agricultural waste. Father Benedict, the discreet, bribable priest Amara had mentioned, was already inside, looking exactly like a man of the cloth who'd made peace with moral flexibility. Elderly, with the kind of face that suggested he'd seen everything and been disappointed by most of it, he held a battered prayer book and a flask that definitely didn't contain holy water. "You're the groom." Father Benedict squinted at Cale. "You look familiar." "I have one of those faces," Cale said blandly. "Common. Forgettable." The priest shrugged, taking another pull from his flask. 50 gold pieces, she said. Non-refundable if you're late, she runs, or someone objects violently. Efficient terms. I've performed 17 of these emergency marriages. You'd be surprised how often someone objects violently. He gestured to a faded bloodstain near the altar. That's from the last one. Angry father. Very traditional. Threw an excellent punch for a man his age. Before Cale could respond to this delightful information, the chapel door opened. Amara slipped inside, and for a moment, Cale forgot he was supposed to be a common laborer playing pretend husband. She'd dressed for the occasion, a simple cream dress that probably qualified as formal by Greywater standards, her dark hair pinned up with silver clasps, a bouquet of wildflowers that she'd clearly picked herself clutched in white-knuckled hands. She looked terrified and beautiful and determined, like someone walking to either her salvation or her execution and refusing to know which until she arrived. Their eyes met across the decrepit chapel. "You came," she said, and the relief in her voice made something uncomfortable twist in Cale's chest. "I took your money. I'm not a complete bastard." He paused. "Just a partial one." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "Partial will do." Father Benedict cleared his throat, clearly eager to perform this questionable sacrament and get back to his breakfast flask. "Shall we begin? I've got a funeral at 8, and the deceased was quite popular. There'll be questions if I smell like cheap wine and hasty matrimony." They positioned themselves in front of the sad little altar. The morning light filtering through broken windows cast strange shadows across the floor. Somewhere outside, a rooster crowed with aggressive optimism about the new day. "Do you have rings?" Father Benedict asked. They exchanged glances. Does it matter? Amara asked. Not particularly. But it's traditional. The priest pulled 2 tarnished bands from his pocket. These belong to my grandparents. You can borrow them for authenticity. Return them after, or don't. They're probably cursed anyway. Bad marriage, those two. Lots of yelling. Kale took the rings. They were surprisingly heavy, etched with symbols he recognized as old pack markings, the kind wolves used before kingdoms became civilized and forgot where they'd come from. Father Benedict opened his prayer book, squinted at it, gave up, and recited from memory. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here in this God's forsaken chapel that I'm pretty sure is structurally unsound, to witness the union of these 2 people who definitely have a story I don't want to know. Do you, Kale Rivers? That's your name. Amara interrupted, looking at him. Rivers? Yes. Problem? No. It's just fitting. Rivers flow away from things. She said it without judgment, just observation. As if she'd already accepted that he'd disappear after this, that permanent wasn't part of their arrangement. Something about that bothered him more than it should have. Father Benedict continued, undeterred. Do you, Kale Rivers, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife, for better or worse, richer or poorer, in sickness and health, until death or paperwork do you part? Kale slid the ring onto Amara's finger. It fit perfectly, which felt like fate showing off. I do. And do you, Amara Linwood, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband, with all the questionable decisions that entails, promising to cherish, honor, and hopefully not regret this within the hour? Amara's hands shook as she placed the ring on Kale's finger. Her eyes met his, storm gray and fierce. I do. Then by the power vested in me by a religious institution that's given up asking questions about my methods, I pronounce you husband and wife. Father Benedict snapped the prayer book shut. You may kiss the bride if you're feeling ambitious, or just sign the certificate and get out. I'm flexible. They both reached for the certificate. Their hands touched over the parchment. For a moment, neither moved. Kale could smell her fear, her hope, the wildflowers in her bouquet, and underneath it all, something that made his dormant wolf stir again. Recognition. Pack. Mine. He shoved the thought away viciously. This was a transaction. A performance. In 2 hours, she'd be gone, and he'd be back to his plan of staying dead until the perfect moment to become extremely alive again. Amara pulled her hand back first. Sorry. You first. You're technically the one being paid. Kale signed his name. His real name. The flourish he'd perfected over years of signing laws and decrees and death warrants. Kale Thorne. Alpha King. Supposedly deceased. He kept his body angled so Amara couldn't see the signature. Father Benedict didn't even glance at it clearly. Literacy wasn't part of his job description for these occasions. Amara signed next. Her handwriting was elegant, educated, the kind taught to noble daughters who were supposed to become decorative wives and produce heirs without causing trouble. Excellent. Father Benedict produced a seal, stamped the certificate with official-looking authority, and handed Amara a copy. Marriage accomplished. Congratulations on your mutually beneficial arrangement. Try not to murder each other before the annulment. Now get out. I need to make this place look respectable for a funeral. They stepped out into the dawn-bright morning. The sun had fully risen, painting gray water in shades of gold that made even the shabby buildings look almost hopeful. Amara clutched the marriage certificate like it was a shield against the entire world. Thank you, she said quietly. I know this was strange. Strange doesn't begin to cover it. But you've saved my life. She pulled out the remaining payment, 500 gold pieces in a leather pouch. As promised. You never have to see me again. I'm taking the noon coach south. By tonight, I'll be in another province, and you can go back to whatever it is you do. Kale took the money. It was heavy. Real. The kind of payment that could fund a lot of things, including a resurrection. What about you? He found himself asking. You think Blackwell will just accept this? He'll have to. The marriage is legal. Filed. Registered. By the time he discovers what I've done, I'll be beyond his reach. She smiled, and it was the saddest thing Kale had seen in months. Sometimes survival is just putting enough distance between yourself and the thing trying to kill you. He knew that truth intimately. He'd been living it for 3 months. Good luck, Amara Linwood. The name felt strange on his tongue. Have a nice life. You too, Cale Rivers. She turned to go, then paused. For what it's worth, you seemed like a decent man. I hope whatever you're running from doesn't catch you. She walked away before he could respond, disappearing down the street toward the coaching station, her marriage certificate tucked safely in her bag. Cale stood in the morning light, his wolf stirring restlessly in his chest. Something felt wrong. The air tasted off. His instincts, honed over years of surviving palace politics and battlefield warfare, were screaming that this wasn't over. He'd learned to trust those instincts. They'd kept him alive when poison and treachery had tried very hard to accomplish the opposite. He followed her, keeping distance, staying in shadows, moving like a predator tracking prey. Amara walked quickly, purpose in every step, clearly eager to reach the coaching station and disappear into her new life. She never looked back. Never noticed the tall stranger maintaining a careful 50 paces behind. She also didn't notice the 2 men who peeled away from a doorway and started following her with the casual precision of people who did this professionally. Cale's blood went cold. He recognized the walk, the positioning, the coordinated movement. These weren't random thugs. These were hunters. Paid hunters. The kind who worked for men like Blackwell and didn't stop until the job was finished. Amara turned down a narrow alley, a shortcut to the coaching station. The hunters accelerated. Cale started running. He reached the alley entrance just as the first hunter grabbed Amara from behind, clamping a hand over her mouth. She struggled, dropping her flowers, her bag with the certificate scattering its contents across the cobblestones. Lord Blackwell sends his regards, the hunter said pleasantly. He's very eager to discuss your new marriage. In private. With knives. The second hunter drew said knives. They looked sharp, well-maintained, and frequently used for activities that made city guards file reports with words like brutal and excessive. Cale cleared his throat. Both hunters turned. Saw a common laborer standing at the alley entrance, looking annoyed. Walk away, the first hunter said. This doesn't concern you. Actually, Cale replied, his voice dropping into something cold and ancient and royal. She's my wife. That makes it very much my concern. Then he moved. 3 months of being dormant didn't mean 3 months of being helpless. The poison had weakened his wolf, but Cale had been a warrior before he'd been an alpha. Before he'd been a king. Before he'd been anything except a boy who'd learned that violence, properly applied, solved problems. He'd just forgotten how good he was at applying it. The first hunter went down hard, Cale's fist connecting with his temple with the precision of someone who'd studied anatomy and knew exactly where to hit for immediate unconsciousness. The second hunter swung his knives fast, professional, aiming for vital organs. Cale caught his wrist, twisted, and the satisfying crack of breaking bone echoed through the alley. The hunter screamed. His knives clattered to the ground. Cale swept his legs, drove him into the cobblestones face first, and planted a knee on his spine. Who sent you? Cale's voice was conversational. Pleasant. The kind of pleasant that suggested escalation was very much on the table. Blackwell, the hunter gasped. Lord Blackwell. He knew. He's always known. He had watchers at the tavern at the chapel. You can't. Cale increased pressure on the knee. Something else cracked. The hunter whimpered. Where is he? The old Linwood estate. East of town. He's waiting there with more men. Plans to make an example. Cale stood, leaving the hunter groaning on the ground. He turned to Amara, who stood frozen against the alley wall, her face white, her eyes wide. You said noon, coach, Cale said calmly, as if he hadn't just dismantled 2 professional killers with the casual efficiency of someone returning library books. That's 3 hours from now. Blackwell will have people at the coaching station. The docks. Every exit. You won't make it. Then what? Amara's voice shook. What do I do? Cale bent down, gathered her scattered belongings, retrieved her flowers with surprising gentleness. When he handed them back, his eyes were dark and determined. You're my wife now. That means when someone tries to kill you, they're trying to kill what's mine. The wolf in his chest growled agreement, more awake than it had been in months. And I have very firm opinions about people who try to kill what's mine. I don't understand. Blackwell wants to make an example? Excellent. So do I. Cale smiled, and it was the kind of smile that belonged on battlefields and in throne rooms and anywhere fear was a tool. We're going to crash his party. Introduce him to your new husband. Have a conversation about appropriate behavior toward married women. That's insane. He has armed men. Resources. You're one person. Trust me, Cale said softly. I'm enough. Behind them, the conscious hunter made a move for his knife. Cale kicked it away without looking, the motion so smooth and practiced it seemed almost bored. Your choice, Amara. Run, and he hunts you forever. Or stand with me, and we end this. Today. Amara looked at this stranger, this man she'd married for convenience, who just defended her with lethal precision, who stood in a blood-splattered alley offering violence like other men offered flowers, and made the second desperate decision in 24 hours. What do we do? Cale's smile widened. The wolf behind his eyes woke up a little more. We go to a wedding, he said. And ruin it spectacularly. Chapter 3. The Wolf Awakens. The old Linwood estate sat on the eastern edge of Greywater, like a reminder of better days gone sour. 3 stories of once grand architecture now falling into genteel decay, surrounded by gardens that had decided agriculture was optional, and a gate that hung at an angle suggesting deep philosophical disagreement with the concept of security. Amara's childhood home, now occupied by the man trying to kill her. They approached from the tree line, Cale moving with the careful precision of someone conducting reconnaissance. The morning had aged into late morning, the sun climbing toward noon, casting sharp shadows that made excellent cover for 2 people with questionable plans and even more questionable odds. There, Amara whispered, pointing. The ballroom. That's where Father planned to hold the ceremony. Blackwell must be using it as his base. Cale counted the guards. 12 visible, probably more inside. All armed. All looking like they'd been hired for competence rather than decoration. Blackwell wasn't taking chances. Tell me about the house layout, he said quietly. Amara blinked. What? You grew up here. You know every room, every passage, every servant's entrance and weak point. That's intelligence. Use it. She studied him with new eyes. You're not just a laborer, are you? What gave it away? The casual violence or the tactical questioning? Both. A pause. Who are you really? Cale met her gaze. For a moment, he considered telling her. Explaining that she'd accidentally married a supposedly dead king, that this situation was about to become exponentially more complicated. That walking into that house with him meant stepping into a conflict that stretched far beyond one noble's obsession with revenge. But the truth would raise questions he couldn't answer. Not yet. Not until his wolf fully woke. Not until he understood why fate had dropped this woman into his life at precisely the moment when everything was about to change. I'm someone who keeps his promises, Cale said instead. You hired me to be your husband. That means protecting you. So tell me about the house. Amara studied him for another long moment, then nodded. There's a servant's entrance. South side, hidden by overgrown hedge. It leads to the kitchen, which connects to the back stairs. We can access the upper floors without going through the main halls. Good. What about the ballroom? 2 entrances, main doors from the grand hall, and French doors opening to the garden. She closed her eyes, remembering. There's a musician's gallery. 15 feet up, runs the length of the room. My mother used to have orchestras perform from there during parties. Cale smiled. High ground. Perfect. Can you still climb? I'm not 12 anymore. That's not an answer. Amara's jaw set with determination. Yes, I can climb. Then here's what we're going to do. Lord Cassius Blackwell was having a spectacular morning. He stood in the Linwood ballroom, surrounded by his men, a glass of stolen wine in his hand, and the deep satisfaction of someone whose plans were proceeding exactly as designed. The room still bore traces of its former glory, crystal chandeliers, although dusty, marble floors, although cracked, tall windows that let in light and made the whole space feel like a stage. which was appropriate because Blackwell appreciated theater. "She'll come," he said to his lieutenant, a scarred man named Garvey who'd been with Blackwell for 8 years and 3 deceased wives. "Fear makes people predictable. She'll realize the coach station is watched, that running is pointless, and she'll come here to beg for mercy." "And if she doesn't?" Garvey asked. "Then we go get her. But I prefer they come willingly. More satisfying." "More." Blackwell swirled his wine, dramatic. As if summoned by his words, the ballroom doors opened. 2 of his guards entered, dragging a struggling Amara between them. Her dress was torn, her hair had come loose from its pins, and she fought with the desperate strength of someone who'd realized cooperation was death delayed. "Excellent timing." Blackwell set down his wine and approached. "My dear Amara, you've saved us all considerable effort." "Go to hell," Amara spat. "Eventually, certainly. But first, we need to discuss your new marriage. Such a touching ceremony, from what I understand. Hasty. Desperate. Illegal, unfortunately. It's completely legal. Because, you see, I've already filed objections with the magistrate. Fraud. Coercion. It helps to have Duke Varen's ear, you understand. He's very interested in ensuring certain marriages proceed according to plan. Alliances matter in the current political climate." Amara went pale. Blackwell smiled. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign an annulment. Declare the marriage fraudulent. Then we'll proceed with our original arrangement. You'll become Lady Blackwell, just as your father promised. And if you're very, very good, you might even survive longer than the last 2. Never. I was hoping you'd say that." Blackwell drew a knife from his belt. "Not the one for killing, that was later. This was the one for persuasion. You see, I find that pain clarifies decision-making. Your new husband, this Cale Rivers, isn't here to protect you. He took his money and disappeared, as hired help does. So it's just us. And I have all the time in the world to change your mind." From the musicians' gallery above, a voice cut through the room like a blade. "Actually, I'm right here. And I have notes about your monologue. Too much exposition. You're explaining when you should be dying." Every head snapped upward. Cale stood on the gallery railing, perfectly balanced, looking down at the assembly with the kind of casual confidence usually reserved for apex predators surveying prey. "Impossible," Blackwell breathed. "The guards are taking a nap. Permanent in a few cases. You really should hire better security." Blackwell's face went from pale to red to a fascinating shade of purple. "Kill him. Kill him now." 12 guards drew weapons and started for the stairs. Cale smiled and dropped from the gallery, 15 feet straight down into the middle of the ballroom. Any normal man would have broken bones, shattered ankles, become an immediate casualty requiring medical attention and last rites. Cale landed in a perfect crouch, the marble cracking slightly beneath his boots, and when he looked up, his eyes were no longer quite human. They were gold. Wolf gold. Alpha gold. "Impossible," Blackwell whispered again, but this time it sounded like a prayer. "Here's the thing about the late Alpha King," Cale said conversationally, straightening to his full height. "He didn't actually die. The poison? Failed. The assassins? Missed. The manure cart? Undignified, but survivable. He's been recovering. Waiting. Getting very, very angry about people who tried to kill him." He started walking toward Blackwell. The guards rushed him. Cale moved through them like smoke, like water, like violence given elegant form. A punch here, ribs breaking. A kick there, knee shattering. A twist, a throw, a guard sailing through the air to impact the wall with a sound like a wet bag of meat hitting stone. His wolf was awake. Not fully, still weak, still recovering, but awake enough. Awake enough to fight. Awake enough to protect. Awake enough to make clear what happened to people who threatened what was his. You want to know the really funny part? Cale caught a sword mid-swing, twisted it from its owner's grip, and used it to parry 3 more attacks in a blur of silver motion. "My new wife? The one you're so interested in murdering? She's married to the Alpha King. That makes her queen. And touching the queen is treason." He punctuated this by breaking another guard's arm with a sound like a tree branch snapping. "The penalty for treason," Cale continued, now standing over 4 unconscious guards while 6 more circled him warily, is death. Usually by beheading. But I'm feeling creative today. Blackwell had gone from purple to ghost white. This is impossible. The king is dead. Varen confirmed. Varen confirmed what he wanted to believe. That's the problem with conspiracy, it makes you sloppy. You stop checking your facts. You trust the comfortable lies. Kale disarmed another guard with casual efficiency. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to let my wife go. You're going to flee this kingdom and never return. And if I ever hear your name again, if you ever come near her again, I will find you. And I will remember that I used to execute traitors slowly, publicly, and with considerable attention to keeping them conscious throughout. The 2 guards holding Amara had let go, backing away slowly, clearly reconsidering their employment choices. Amara stood frozen, staring at Kale, at the gold eyes, at the impossible strength, at the truth that had just crashed through her understanding of reality like a boulder through stained glass. She couldn't finish the sentence. Currently very protective of my wife? Yes. Kale's gaze never left Blackwell. We'll discuss the details later. Right now, Lord Blackwell needs to make a decision. Stay and die, or run and live. I recommend the second option, but I'm flexible. Blackwell's lieutenant, Garvey, had more survival instinct than his employer. He dropped his sword. We're done. Boys, stand down. The remaining guards, seeing their most experienced member surrender, followed suit. Weapons clattered to marble. Hands raised in universal gestures of, "Please don't murder us, Your Majesty." Blackwell alone stood defiant, his face twisted with rage and disbelief. This is insane. Duke Varen will never. Varen, Kale interrupted, his voice dropping to something cold and ancient and absolutely final, is living on borrowed time. He just doesn't know it yet. Neither do his friends. Neither did you, until about 30 seconds ago. He took a step closer. Last chance. Run. Now. While I'm feeling merciful. For a moment, Blackwell looked like he might actually be stupid enough to fight. His hand twitched toward another knife. His face worked through calculations of odds and pride and the very human delusion that willpower could overcome reality. Then Amara spoke, her voice steady despite everything. He's serious. And if you stay, I'll ask him to make it hurt. For what you did to your wives. For what you tried to do to me. Her gray eyes were storm-dark and fierce. Run, Cassius. While you still can. That broke him. The certainty in her voice. The gold in Kale's eyes. The bodies of his guards scattered across the ballroom like discarded toys. Blackwell's survival instincts finally overrode his ego. He ran. Stumbled through the French doors into the garden, his expensive boots catching on overgrown weeds, his breath coming in panicked gasps. His remaining guards followed, abandoning honor and wages in favor of keeping their internal organs internal. Kale watched them go, making no move to follow. When the last guard disappeared through the gate, he finally let himself look at Amara. She stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by unconscious men and broken furniture, still clutching the wildflowers she'd carried to their wedding. Her dress was torn. Her hair was wild. She looked like a warrior queen who'd accidentally wandered into her own coronation without proper notice. So, she said quietly, "The Alpha King." "Yes." "Who supposedly died." "Very supposedly." "And you just, what? Decided to hide in Greywater? Work construction? Marry random desperate women for money?" Kale had the grace to look slightly sheepish. The plan wasn't supposed to include the marriage. That part was improvisation. Improvisation. Amara laughed, high and slightly hysterical. "I hired the missing king as my fake husband. That's hilarious? Convenient? Catastrophically complicated. All 3. She sat down abruptly on the marble floor, her legs apparently deciding they'd done enough standing for one day. The flowers fell from her hands. Is the marriage even legal? Can a dead king sign a marriage certificate? Technically, I signed as Kale Thorne, which is my name, and I'm not actually dead. So yes, it's legal. He moved closer, carefully, the way one approached a spooked horse. More legal than either of us anticipated, unfortunately. Unfortunately? Her voice went sharp. I'm married to the Alpha King. That makes me queen. Yes. Sorry about that. Sorry. She looked up at him, and gods, even sitting on a floor covered in destruction, she was magnificent. You're sorry you made me queen. You didn't sign up for this. Kale crouched beside her, bringing himself to eye level. You wanted a fake marriage. A convenient escape. Not this. Amara stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. Really laughing, the kind of laughter that came from surviving something terrible and discovering the universe had a sense of humor after all. By tomorrow I need a husband, she gasped between laughs. That's what I said. A husband. Not a king. Not a walking political revolution. Just someone who could sign a paper and disappear. To be fair, I was planning to disappear. You were supposed to be on a coach south by now, living happily ever after in some estate where no one bothered you. Kale's mouth quirked. Then Blackwell sent hunters and I got invested. Invested. She wiped her eyes. Is that what we're calling dismantling 12 armed guards like they were made of paper? Protective. I got protective. Because I'm your wife. Because you're my wife, Kale agreed. And before you ask if I can annul it, the answer is complicated. Queens don't just unbecome queens. The moment you married me, you stepped into something bigger than either of us. Varen won't stop. His allies won't stop. They'll see you as a threat, a symbol, a way to get to me. Amara's laughter faded. So I'm trapped. Again. Different prison, same locked door. No. Kale took her hand, the one wearing his grandmother's ring. You're protected. There's a difference. I'm not Blackwell. I'm not your father. I'm not selling you or trading you or using you as a bargaining chip. You're my wife. My queen. And that means something to me. What does it mean? He met her eyes, gold meeting gray, and told her the truth. It means I'll burn down anyone who tries to hurt you. It means you get a choice in this, where we go from here, what we do, how we fix the kingdom that's falling apart. It means partnership, if you want it. Or separation with protection if you don't. But it doesn't mean imprisonment. Never that. Amara studied his face, searching for lies, for manipulation, for the trap she'd spent her life learning to recognize. She found only exhaustion, determination, and something that looked dangerously like honesty. What if I want partnership? She asked quietly. Kale's heart, which had barely functioned normally for 3 months, did something complicated in his chest. Then we have a lot of work ahead of us. Varen needs to be dealt with. The kingdom needs its king back. And you need a proper introduction to being royalty, which is mostly arguing with advisors and signing things while looking regal. I can argue. I'm good at arguing. Excellent. That's half the job. He stood, offering his hand. The other half is surviving assassination attempts and pretending to enjoy diplomatic dinners where the food is terrible and the company is worse. Amara took his hand. Let him pull her to her feet. They stood in the ruined ballroom, surrounded by evidence of violence, still wearing the rings they'd exchanged hours ago in a decrepit chapel with a drunk priest. This is insane, she said. Completely. We've known each other less than 24 hours. 16 hours, technically. And now we're married. Properly married. With you being a king and me being a queen, and apparently we have to save a kingdom. That about covers it. Kale smiled. Still want your 600 gold pieces back? Amara looked at him, really looked at him. Saw the exhaustion beneath the strength. The loneliness beneath the power. The man who'd been surviving alone for 3 months, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what was his. Saw, too, the way he'd fought for her. Protected her. Given her choices when everyone else in her life had taken them away. Keep the gold, she said. Consider it an investment in our mutual survival. Practical. I like that in a queen. Don't get used to it. I plan to be extremely impractical about several things. Starting with whether we're going to just let Blackwell run away. Kale raised an eyebrow. You want to chase him? I want to make sure he never comes back. That he understands what happens when you threaten a queen. Amara's smile was sharp. You said you were feeling creative about executions. I have suggestions. And there it was, the steel beneath the fear, the fire beneath the desperation. Kale had married her thinking she needed saving. He was beginning to realize she'd been saving herself all along. He'd just provided some tactical support and convenient royal authority. "Tell me your suggestions," he said. She did. They were inventive, legally questionable, and absolutely perfect. Kale's wolf, now fully awake and paying attention, approved heartily. Outside, the sun climbed toward afternoon. Somewhere in the capital, Duke Varen was about to receive news that would ruin his day, his plans, and possibly his life expectancy. And in the ruined ballroom of the Linwood estate, a king and his accidental queen began planning a revolution that would start with a wedding announcement and end with a kingdom reclaimed. "One more thing," Amara said as they prepared to leave. "When we do announce this, the marriage, your return, all of it, I want to be there. Not hidden away for protection. Not kept safe while you do the dangerous work. I want to stand beside you." Kale looked at her, this woman who'd walked into a tavern with a desperate plan and walked out with a crown she never wanted. Who'd faced down killers and kings and found courage somewhere in the gap between fear and necessity. "Deal," he said. "But you're learning to fight first. Properly. None of this improvised survival nonsense. You'll teach me. I'll teach you. Consider it a wedding gift. Most grooms give jewelry. I'm giving you the ability to commit violence effectively." Amara laughed. "Best wedding gift ever." They walked out of the ballroom together, leaving behind the wreckage of Blackwell's plans and the old life Amara had escaped. Outside, the day was bright and clear, full of dangerous possibilities and the kind of hope that came from surviving impossible odds. Neither of them noticed the figure watching from the tree line, one of Blackwell's scouts, already racing toward the capital with news that would change everything. The dead king had returned. And he'd brought a queen. Chapter 4. The Queen Learns to Bite. 3 days after the ballroom incident, Amara discovered that being queen was significantly less glamorous than literature suggested and considerably more likely to result in bruises. "Again," Kale said, circling her in the overgrown garden behind the Linwood estate. "This time, don't telegraph your right hook. Your shoulder moves before your fist. It's like putting up a sign that says, 'Incoming violence, please dodge.'" Amara wiped sweat from her forehead and adjusted her stance. They'd been at this for 2 hours, and her muscles were developing opinions about his teaching methods. Loud, painful opinions expressed through the medium of cramping. "You know," she panted, "most queens get taught embroidery and etiquette. Not how to break someone's jaw. Most queens don't accidentally marry warrior kings hiding in border towns. You got the deluxe package." Kale moved closer, adjusting her grip. His hands were warm, calloused, and surprisingly gentle despite belonging to someone who'd recently dismantled 12 armed men. "Besides, embroidery won't save you if Varen sends assassins." "Will punching save me?" "Punching, stabbing, tactical retreat, and knowing where to aim for maximum damage. You're getting the complete curriculum." He stepped back. "Now, show me what you've learned. Defend yourself." He moved fast, not full speed, but fast enough to be challenging. Amara blocked the first strike, ducked the second, and managed to land a hit to his ribs that would have hurt more if he wasn't built like a particularly athletic brick wall. "Better." Kale grinned. "Your footwork's improving. You're thinking 3 moves ahead instead of just reacting. I'm thinking about sitting down. Everything hurts. Pain means you're learning." "No pain, no." A cough interrupted him. They both turned to find Father Benedict standing at the garden gate, looking even more rumpled than usual, clutching a sealed letter. "Your Majesty," the priest said, offering a bow that suggested he'd recently learned Kale's actual identity and was still processing the implications. A messenger arrived. From the capital. He seemed agitated. Kale took the letter, broke the seal, and read. His expression went from curious to grim to something that looked like satisfied vengeance. "What?" Amara asked. "Duke Varen has discovered I'm alive. He's calling for an emergency council meeting, declaring me an imposter, demanding I present myself for verification, which is code for walk into our trap so we can finish killing you properly." Kale passed her the letter. "He's also very interested in this mysterious new wife. Wants to question her about our marriage. Verify its legitimacy. Amara read the formal language hiding threats like knives in silk. He's scared. Terrified. My return destroys everything he's built. The Regency, the power consolidation, all the deals he's made with creatures like Blackwell. If I'm alive and married, every legal maneuver he's made becomes treason. Kale's smile was sharp. He's going to try to discredit us. Claim the marriage is fraud. That you're an opportunist. That I'm an imposter being manipulated by enemies of the state. So, what do? We accept his invitation. Kale turned to Father Benedict. How fast can you reach the capital? The priest blinked. 2 days by fast horse. Why? Because you're going to deliver a message to the High Temple. Tell them Alpha King Kale Thorne requests a formal coronation ceremony. For both himself and his queen. Public. Witnessed. Undeniably legitimate. A coronation, Amara repeated slowly. You want to walk into the capital, where your enemies control the guard, the court, and probably several assassination plots, and crown yourself king. Crown ourselves, Kale corrected. You're part of this now. Partnership, remember? We stand together or not at all. That's insane. Varen will never allow it. He'll have every entrance watched, every ally compromised, every conventional approach blocked. Yes, which is why we're not using conventional approaches. Kale's eyes gleamed with something that looked like dangerous inspiration. Varen thinks he knows how kings return to power. Armies. Supporters. Political maneuvering. He's prepared for all of that. And we're doing what instead? Walking in the front door. Announcing ourselves. Claiming our throne in front of witnesses he can't silence or bribe. Using his own emergency council meeting as our stage. Kale started pacing, the way he did when plans formed. The High Temple is neutral ground. Sacred. Even Varen can't openly attack us there without losing all credibility. If we can reach it, if we can perform the coronation ceremony, he's finished. That's a lot of ifs. All good plans have ifs. It's when there are no ifs that you should worry. He stopped, turning to face her fully. But I meant what I said. Partnership. You don't have to do this. I can leave you somewhere safe. No. Amara's voice was firm. I stood beside you in that ballroom. I'll stand beside you in the capital. You said I'm queen. That means I don't hide while my husband fights our battles alone. Something complicated happened in Kale's expression, pride, concern, and what might have been affection all tangling together. You've been queen for 3 days and you're already better at this than most people who train their whole lives. I've had an excellent teacher. She paused. Who still needs to explain exactly how we're getting into a hostile capital without being murdered immediately. That's the fun part. I'm learning that when you say fun, you mean catastrophically dangerous. Catastrophically dangerous with style. Kale grinned. Tell me, my queen, have you ever wanted to crash a very formal political gathering wearing an outrageous amount of jewels and an expression that suggests you're absolutely ready to stab everyone in the room? Amara considered this. Surprisingly often, actually. Perfect. Then we're going to get along beautifully. They departed at dawn the next morning, after Amara had slept fitfully through dreams of thrones and knives and gold-eyed wolves that spoke with her husband's voice. Kale had spent the night planning, writing messages, and occasionally checking the perimeter like a man expecting attack at any moment. Which, given their circumstances, was entirely reasonable. They traveled light, no retinue, no guards, just 2 people on horses with weapons and determination. Kale had recovered enough that his wolf was partially functional, though still not at full strength. Enough to fight if needed. Enough to protect. Not enough to take on an army. Tell me about Duke Varen, Amara said as they rode through the morning mist. You said he's your uncle? My father's younger brother. Always ambitious. Always bitter about being born second. Kale's jaw tightened. He was at my coronation feast. Smiling. Offering toasts. While someone was putting poison in my wine. You think he did it? I know he did. The poison, shadowbane root mixed with wolfsbane essence, requires specific knowledge. It's designed to kill alphas specifically. Ordinary humans would be fine. But for wolf shifters, it shuts down our connection to our animal side, makes us vulnerable. He paused. Only someone with deep knowledge of royal bloodlines would know to use it. How did you survive? My guard, Marcus. He noticed something was wrong, got me out through the secret passages before the poison could finish its work. He died holding off assassins while I escaped. Kale's voice went flat. His last words were, "Run, you idiot." Very undignified for a final command from your most loyal protector. Amara heard the grief beneath the humor. Where is he now? Buried somewhere outside the palace. Unmarked grave. Varen declared him a traitor posthumously, blamed him for my death. It's a nice touch, it prevents his family from claiming his pension or honoring his memory. The gold in Kale's eyes flickered. I'm adding it to the very long list of reasons I'm going to destroy my uncle with extreme prejudice. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape shifting from rural farms to scattered villages to, eventually, the outskirts of the capital. The city sprawled across the horizon like a jeweled beast, all spires and walls, and the kind of organized chaos that came from thousands of people living on top of each other while pretending to have a functional society. It's bigger than I expected, Amara said quietly. Most things are. Kale studied the walls, the guard positions, the flow of traffic through the gates. We'll enter at dusk. Blend with the merchant caravans returning from market. Guards will be tired, less attentive. We'll head straight for the temple district. And if we're recognized? Then things get exciting quickly. He met her eyes. Last chance to back out. Once we enter those gates, we're committed. Varen will know within the hour. Every guard, every soldier, every hired blade in the city will be looking for us. Amara thought about turning back. About the safe life she could have in some remote estate. About being simply Amara Linwood instead of queen of a shattered kingdom. Then she thought about Blackwell's knife at her throat. Her father's selling her like furniture. The desperate woman who'd walked into a tavern and gambled everything on a stranger's honor. That woman deserved better than running away. We're going in, she said firmly. Kale's smile was proud. That's my queen. They waited until dusk as planned. Joined a merchant caravan hauling textiles and spices. Amara wrapped in a plain cloak, Kale slouching to hide his height. The guards at the gate were indeed tired, waving through caravans with barely a glance. They entered the capital. The city swallowed them, noise and light, and the particular smell of urban density that combined cooking food, horse manure, and human ambition. They moved through the crowds, just two more travelers among thousands, heading toward the temple district. The high temple rose above the city like a prayer made stone. Ancient. Beautiful. Neutral ground where even kings hesitated to bring violence. They'd be safe there. Assuming they reached it before someone realized the supposedly dead Alpha King was walking the streets. They were 3 blocks from the temple when someone recognized Kale. Your Majesty? An old woman, clutching a market basket, staring at him with wide eyes. But you're supposed to be alive? Kale smiled at her. Rumors of my death were greatly exaggerated. Please don't tell anyone you saw me for the next 10 minutes. The woman nodded mutely. They kept walking, faster now. But the damage was done. Whispers started spreading like fire in dry grass. The king. The dead king. Walking the streets. With a woman. Who is she? Where are they going? By the time they reached the temple plaza, a crowd had formed. Curious citizens, drawn by gossip and the human instinct to witness impossible things. And somewhere in that crowd, Amara knew, would be Varen's informants. Racing to report. Raising alarms. The temple doors stood ahead. Sanctuary. Safety. Legitimacy. Between them and those doors stood 50 of Duke Varen's personal guard. Well, Kale said mildly, this is going to be interesting. The guard captain stepped forward, a woman with scars and the kind of face that suggested she'd seen every trick and wasn't impressed by any of them. Stand down. By order of Duke Varen, Regent of the Realm, you are to surrender immediately. I appreciate the formal greeting, Kale replied, not slowing his approach. But I'm afraid I can't surrender to my own guards. Awkward chain of command issues. You claim to be King Kale Thorn. Prove it. Gladly. Kale's eyes shifted full gold. His presence expanded not physically, but something else. Something ancient and powerful and absolutely royal. The Wolf King, awakening fully for the first time in 3 months. I am Kale Thorn, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, protector of the pack, keeper of the old laws. This is my queen, Amara Thorne. And we are entering that temple. You can assist us, or you can explain to history why you stood between a king and his coronation. The temperature in the plaza dropped. The crowd went silent. Every wolf shifter present, guard and citizen alike, felt it. The pull of alpha command. The weight of royal authority. The guard captain wavered. Her hand went to her sword, then away. Loyalty and survival instinct warred across her face. Captain Reyna, Kale said more gently. I remember you. You served under Commander Marcus. Saved my life during the border wars 10 years ago. I gave you a commendation personally. Reyna's eyes widened with recognition. Your Majesty. We thought. They said you were dead. They lied. Marcus died protecting me. Varen murdered him and called it treason. You know it's true. You all know it's true. Kale looked past her to the assembled guards. I'm not asking you to fight your fellow soldiers. I'm asking you to remember your oaths. To stand aside. To let your king reclaim what was stolen. A long pause. Then Reyna stepped aside. One by one, the other guards followed, creating a path to the temple doors. Duke Varen, watching from a window across the plaza, threw his wine glass across the room and started screaming orders that would end with a lot of people dying very quickly. But Kale and Amara were already through the temple doors, already safe on sacred ground, already being greeted by priests who'd been waiting 3 months for this exact moment. The coronation would happen at dawn, and the kingdom was about to discover that its dead king had returned with a queen who'd learned to bite. Chapter 5. The Crown and the Reckoning. Dawn broke over the capital like a judgment. Amara stood in the temple's preparation chamber, staring at her reflection in a mirror older than the kingdom itself, trying to reconcile the woman she saw with the desperate girl who'd walked into a tavern 5 days ago. The coronation dress was magnificent, white silk embroidered with silver wolves, a gift from the temple's collection kept for exactly these ceremonies. Her dark hair had been arranged by priestesses who treated the task like holy ritual, weaving in diamonds and moonstones until she looked like something from a legend. She looked like a queen. She felt like someone playing dress-up in borrowed clothes while an entire city outside debated whether to accept or attack her. The dress fits perfectly, said High Priestess Talia, a woman older than stone and twice as intimidating. The goddess provides for her chosen. Warrior seamstresses are very good at making adjustments quickly, Amara replied, earning a sharp smile from the priestess. That too. But I prefer the mystical explanation. More impressive. Through the chamber walls, Amara could hear the sounds of the temple filling with people. Citizens who'd braved guards and curfews to witness the impossible. Nobles who'd decided survival meant backing the winning side. Soldiers whose loyalty was being tested in real time. And somewhere in that crowd, Duke Varen and his allies, waiting for their chance to tear this moment apart. You're afraid, Talia observed, not unkindly. Terrified, Amara admitted. I've been queen for 5 days. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to rule. I married a stranger to escape a monster, and now I'm about to be crowned in front of thousands of people who'll expect me to know how to be this. Child, every queen in history has felt exactly that fear. The crown doesn't make you wise. It makes you responsible. You learn wisdom by surviving mistakes. Talia placed a hand on Amara's shoulder. But I'll tell you what I see. I see a woman who walked through fire to save herself. Who stood beside a king when running would have been easier. Who looks at that crown like it's a weapon she's willing to learn to wield. That's what makes a good queen. Not knowledge. Not training. Courage. What if courage isn't enough? Then you'll fail spectacularly. But at least you'll fail while trying, which is better than most people manage. The priestess smiled. Besides, you married a man who's survived assassination, poison, defenestration into manure, and 3 months pretending to enjoy construction work. Between the two of you, you'll figure it out. Before Amara could respond, a knock sounded. Kale entered, and the preparation chamber suddenly felt smaller. He wore the traditional coronation regalia, black and silver, ancient symbols of the Wolf Kings embroidered across his chest, a cloak that looked like captured starlight. He'd shaved, tamed his hair into something almost civilized, and moved with the kind of contained power that suggested violence was currently on break but remained available if needed. He looked like a king. He looked like trouble. He looked at Amara and forgot how to breathe. "You're beautiful," he said, with the eloquence of someone whose brain had temporarily stopped functioning. "You clean up well yourself," Amara managed. "Very regal. Threatening. Kingly." "Kingly?" Kale's mouth quirked. "Is that even a word?" "It is now. I'm about to be queen. I can make words." Talia coughed discreetly. "The ceremony begins in 10 minutes. I'll leave you two to have whatever conversation needs having." She swept out, closing the door behind her. They stood in sudden silence, two people about to step into roles that would define the rest of their lives, who barely knew each other beyond crisis and combat. "Are you ready?" Kale asked. "Absolutely not." "You?" Terrified. He moved closer. "I've fought wars. Survived assassination. Led armies into battles where death was guaranteed for everyone except the people with impressive plot armor. This is somehow more frightening. Because if we fail, we don't just die. We take the kingdom with us." That's cheerfully apocalyptic. But yes. Kale took her hand, the one wearing his grandmother's ring. "Amara, I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you wanted a fake marriage, a quick escape, a life without complications. Instead you got me, a coronation, and a kingdom full of people who'll spend the next decade debating whether you're legitimate. Are you trying to talk me out of this?" "I'm trying to give you one last chance to run. Once that crown touches your head, you're committed. You can't unbecome queen. You can't go back to being just Amara Linwood who wanted a quiet life somewhere south where nobody bothered her." Amara studied him, saw the exhaustion, the hope, the fear that she'd realize what she'd signed up for and decide it wasn't worth it. "You know what I've realized," she said. "I spent my whole life letting other people decide what I'd become. My father decided I'd be sold to Blackwell. Blackwell decided I'd be his victim. Everyone decided I'd be quiet and obedient and grateful for whatever scraps of autonomy they offered." She squeezed his hand. "Then I walked into a tavern and made my own decision. I chose you. I chose this. Yes, I was desperate. Yes, I was terrified. But it was my choice. And I'm tired of running from the consequences of choosing to save myself. Even if the consequences include ruling a kingdom? Especially if they include that. Because ruling means I get to decide things. I get to make choices for myself and help others make choices for themselves. I get to look at Duke Varen and Lord Blackwell, and every other monster who thinks people are property, and I get to say no, with authority. And possibly sharp objects." She smiled. "So yes, I'm ready. Are you ready to have a queen who has opinions and sharp objects?" Kale laughed, the first genuine, unguarded laugh she'd heard from him. "My dear wife, I'm counting on it." He leaned forward and kissed her. Not like a political gesture. Not like an arrangement. Like a promise. Like a beginning. Like maybe this accidental marriage might become something real. Outside, bells began ringing. The ceremony was starting. They walked to the temple's great hall hand in hand, and if they were both terrified, at least they were terrified together. The Great Hall of the High Temple was a space designed to remind humans of their insignificance. Vaulted ceilings that reached toward the heavens. Columns carved with the history of every king who'd ever been crowned. Light streaming through stained glass windows that turned the air into captured rainbows. It was packed. Every seat filled. People standing in the aisles, pressed against walls, desperate for a view. Citizens who'd risked curfew to witness history. Nobles calculating their allegiances in real time. Soldiers whose loyalty was about to be tested publicly and irrevocably. And at the front, in seats of honor that they'd claimed through political maneuvering and thinly veiled threats, Duke Varen and his allies. Varen was a tall man who'd aged into distinguished rather than elderly, with silver hair and the kind of face that photographed well and hid cruelty efficiently. He wore formal robes of state, sitting as if he owned the entire temple and was merely tolerating their use of it. Beside him, Lord Blackwell, who'd apparently decided that fleeing the kingdom was for cowards. Several other nobles whose names Amara didn't know but whose hostile expressions needed no introduction. And, most troublingly, Commander General Thrace, head of the royal army, whose loyalty would determine whether this coronation ended in celebration or bloodshed. Kale and Amara entered through the great doors. The crowd roared, some in joy, some in confusion, all in recognition that something significant was happening and they were witnessing it. High Priestess Talia stood at the altar, holding 2 crowns that had crowned every Alpha King and Queen for 5 generations. Ancient, sacred, undeniable. Approach, she commanded, her voice filling the hall without effort. They walked the long aisle together. Amara felt every eye on her, judging, weighing, deciding whether she deserved to be here. She kept her head high and her hand in Kale's and walked like a queen. They reached the altar. Talia looked at them with something that might have been approval. "We are gathered in sacred witness," she began, "to crown those chosen by blood, by right, and by the will of the goddess. Kale Thorn, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, who was thought lost but has returned. And Amara Thorn, his chosen queen, who stands beside him." Objection. Varen's voice cut through the ceremony like a blade. He stood, theatrical timing perfect. "This ceremony is fraudulent. Kale Thorn is dead. I have death certificates, witnesses, burial records. This man is an impostor. And this woman," he gestured dismissively at Amara, "is a desperate noble's daughter who paid some laborer to marry her. She has no claim to the throne." The hall erupted. Shouting. Accusations. Half the crowd seemed ready to riot, though which direction the riot would go remained entertainingly unclear. Talia raised her hand. Silence fell with the weight of divine authority. "Duke Varen, you claim this man is not Kale Thorn." "I claim exactly that." "Then let us test it." Talia produced a ceremonial dagger, ancient and covered in runes. Alpha blood carries markers. Proof of lineage that cannot be forged. If this man is truly Kale Thorn, his blood will sing the old song. If he's an impostor. She let the implication hang. Kale stepped forward without hesitation. Held out his hand. "Test me." Talia drew the blade across his palm. Blood welled, not red, but silver-touched. It dripped onto the altar stone, and the runes carved there began to glow. Soft at first, then brighter, until the entire altar blazed with light that spoke of ancient magic and royal bloodlines that stretched back before kingdoms existed. The song that rose was wordless but unmistakable, the howl of wolves, the thunder of battlefields, the weight of crowns worn across generations. It filled the hall, resonated in the bones of every wolf shifter present, and declared with absolute certainty, "This is the king." The light faded. Silence stretched like a held breath. Varen's face had gone white. Impossible. The poison should have he caught himself, but too late. Should have what? Kale asked pleasantly, his hand still bleeding silver onto sacred stone. "Killed me?" "Yes, uncle, it should have. Shadowbane root mixed with wolfsbane essence. Very specific poison. Very specific knowledge required to use it. Knowledge that, say, a duke who'd studied royal bloodlines his entire life might possess. You have no proof. I have your alchemist. Marcus got him out before he died. He's been hiding in the southern provinces, writing down everything. Names, dates, amounts paid. Including the payments from your personal treasury." Kale's smile was sharp. "Shall I have him brought in?" "He's very eager to testify. Apparently attempted regicide weighs on the conscience." Varen's composure cracked. "You think you can just return and take what's mine? I've spent 3 months building support, making alliances, ensuring my position. Half the nobles in this room owe me favors. The army answers to me." "The army answers to whoever General Thrace tells them to answer to," Kale corrected. He looked directly at the commander. "General, we served together in the border wars. I gave you your commission personally. Trusted you with my life on 6 separate battlefields. I'm trusting you now. Who do you serve? The man who tried to kill your king? Or the king himself?" General Thrace stood slowly. She was a woman who'd earned her rank through competence and the kind of tactical brilliance that turned hopeless battles into legendary victories. Every eye in the hall turned to her. The silence was absolute. "I serve the crown," Thrace said clearly. "The legitimate crown. Worn by the legitimate king." She looked at Varen with contempt. My Lord Duke, you are under arrest for treason, conspiracy to murder, and making me waste 3 months taking orders from a glorified accountant with delusions of adequacy. Varen's allies began backing away, suddenly discovering that loyalty to a losing side was negotiable. His guards made no move to defend him. Captain Reyna had clearly spread word about the king's return, and soldiers were pragmatic about which orders constituted career advancement versus suicide. You can't do this, Varen snarled. The council won't accept it. The nobility won't accept it. He pointed at Amara with shaking finger, is nobody. A merchant's daughter playing at royalty. The kingdom will never accept a commoner queen. Actually, Amara said, speaking for the first time, her voice carrying through the hall with surprising authority, my mother was Lady Eleanor Thorne, the late king's cousin, which makes me nobility by blood. She paused for effect. It's in the genealogical records. I'm sure you verified that before trying to marry me off to your associate Lord Blackwell. Oh wait, you didn't, because you were too busy gambling away my father's estate and selling me like livestock. The crowd murmured. This was getting good. Better than theater. Real royal drama with actual consequences. Lord Blackwell, who'd been trying to blend into his seat, suddenly found himself the center of attention again. And speaking of Blackwell, Cale continued, he violated about 17 laws during his attempt to murder my wife, including attacking her on the day of our legal marriage, which is not just assault, but treason, touching the queen being approximately as illegal as touching the king without permission. He smiled at Blackwell. I believe you mentioned something about creative executions during our last conversation? Blackwell bolted. Made it 3 steps before 2 of Thrace's soldiers tackled him with the efficiency of people who'd been waiting for permission to do exactly that. Anyone else want to object to this coronation? Cale asked the crowd. Now's your chance. Speak freely. I promise not to execute anyone for honest disagreement. Silence. Excellent. Then let's continue. High Priestess Talia, who'd been watching the drama unfold with the patient amusement of someone who'd seen 6 coronations and 3 coup attempts, raised the first crown. Cale Thorne, do you swear to uphold the laws of this kingdom, to protect its people, to rule with wisdom and justice, to honor the old ways while building the new? I swear, Cale said clearly. The crown settled on his head, heavy with history, responsibility, and the weight of a kingdom that had been falling apart for 3 months. The moment it touched him, something shifted. His posture. His presence. The gold in his eyes burned brighter. The king had returned. Talia turned to Amara, raising the second crown. Amara Thorne, do you swear to stand beside the king, to rule in partnership, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, to be voice for the voiceless, to wield power with mercy and justice? Amara thought about the girl who'd walked into a tavern. About the woman who'd faced down Blackwell. About every moment between desperation and this one. I swear, she said. The crown settled on her head, and suddenly she understood why they called it a burden. It was heavy, real, permanent. She was queen. The hall erupted in cheers. Not everyone, some nobles still looked sour, some citizens confused, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to make it real. Cale took her hand, raised it high, presented his queen to the kingdom. One more thing, he said, his voice cutting through the celebration. Duke Varen, Lord Blackwell, anyone else who participated in the assassination attempt, the conspiracy, or the general clusterfuck that's been the last 3 months. You have a choice. Confess fully, provide all evidence, and accept exile with your lives. Or remain silent, be tried for treason, and discover exactly how creative I can be with executions when properly motivated. I'll confess, someone shouted from the back. Then another. Then a wave of conspirators suddenly discovering that cooperation beat execution. Varen alone remained silent, his face twisted with rage and defeat. Nothing to say, uncle? Cale asked. You'll regret this, Varen spat. The kingdom is broken. The borders are threatened. The economy is collapsing. You think a crown and a convenient wife will fix everything? You're a boy playing at king while the world burns. You're absolutely right, Cale agreed. The kingdom is a mess. It'll take years to fix everything you broke. But here's the difference between us. I'm not fixing it alone. I have a queen who's smarter than both of us. I have a general who actually knows strategy. I have a people who are tired of being pawns in other people's games. And I have time, which you've just run out of. He nodded to Thrace. Take him. The traitors get the dungeons pending trial. Let them think about their choices in the dark. As guards dragged Varen away, still shouting about injustice, about rights, about the terrible mistake everyone was making, Amara felt something settle in her chest. Not peace. Not certainty. But purpose. Direction. They'd survived the coronation. Now came the hard part, actually ruling. Epilogue, 3 months later. The council meeting had devolved into arguing about sheep. Amara sat at the head of the table beside Kale, listening to 5 nobles debate with passionate intensity whether the import tax on wool should be adjusted for seasonal variance or maintained at a flat rate year-round. It had been going on for 45 minutes. She caught Kale's eye. He looked like he was reconsidering the whole, not executing people for disagreement, promise. Gentlemen, Amara interrupted. I appreciate your thorough analysis of sheep-related economics. But we have 17 other agenda items, and if we spend this much time on every issue, we'll be here until the sheep evolve into something more interesting. Lord Pemberton, who'd been mid-passionate gesture about wool markets, deflated slightly. Your Majesty, this is an important economic consideration. It is. Which is why I'm creating a subcommittee to study it properly and report back next month with recommendations. Motion to table until then. Hands rose. The sheep debate died. The meeting moved forward. Kale leaned over, whispered, "You're better at this than I am. You're better at the looking intimidating while people confess crimes part. I'm better at the making bureaucracy function without murder part. Division of labor. Partnership," he agreed. The meeting continued, reports on border security, improving, economic recovery, slow but steady, rebuilding the palace's west wing that had been damaged during a half-hearted coup attempt by Varen's last supporter, expensive but necessary. Varen himself was currently enjoying forced retirement in a very secure prison, writing his memoirs and complaining about the food quality. His trial had been public, thorough, and resulted in life imprisonment rather than execution. Kale had decided that letting his uncle grow old in a cell was more satisfying than a quick death. Blackwell had fled the kingdom and was rumored to be hiding in the Southern Territories, where apparently even criminals had standards and weren't thrilled about hosting a serial wife murderer. The kingdom was healing. Slowly. Messily. With setbacks and complications and approximately 600 sheep-related policy debates. But healing. After the council meeting ended, Amara and Kale walked through the rebuilt palace gardens, enjoying an hour of quiet before the next crisis emerged. "Do you regret it?" Kale asked. The tavern. The desperate marriage. All of this. Amara considered. 3 months ago, she'd been a desperate woman with a terrible plan. Now she was queen, helping rebuild a kingdom, making decisions that affected thousands of lives, married to a man who'd been a stranger and was becoming something else. Something complicated and real and worth keeping. "I regret the sheep debate," she said. "That was 45 minutes of my life I'll never recover. But the rest? The marriage, the crown, the terrifying responsibility." She took his hand. "No, I don't regret choosing to save myself. Even if the consequences included you. Especially if they included me," Kale corrected. "Don't flatter yourself. You're moderately acceptable as husbands go." "Moderately acceptable? I'm the Alpha King. I have titles. Accomplishments. I once fought 12 armed men to protect your honor. And yet you still can't manage to not snore." "That's a vicious lie. I don't snore. I breathe dramatically." They walked in comfortable silence, 2 people who'd started as a transaction and were slowly becoming a partnership. Maybe even something more, though neither was quite ready to name it. "By tomorrow I need a husband," Amara said quietly, remembering that desperate night in the tavern. "That's what I said." "And I needed 600 gold pieces," Kale added. "Best business transaction I ever made. We should put that on our official portrait." King and Queen started as a business transaction, ended up saving a kingdom. Too long. How about King and Queen made poor decisions, got lucky? Perfect. Very inspirational for future generations. They reached the garden center, where a fountain had been recently restored. Water sparkled in afternoon light, peaceful and ordinary, and nothing like the chaos they'd survived to get here. Thank you, Kale said suddenly. For walking into that tavern. For choosing me. For being brave enough to stay when you could have run. Thank you for being stupid enough to marry a desperate stranger and smart enough to keep the promise you made. Amara leaned against him. We make a good team. Even if one of us snores dramatically. I will prove, scientifically, that I don't. A messenger rushed into the garden, looking panicked. Your Majesties. Urgent news from the northern border. They exchanged glances. Here we go again. Crisis or catastrophe? Kale asked. Somewhere in between, sire. The mountain clans are requesting audience. They want to discuss an alliance. Huh. Kale looked surprised. That's actually good news. See, Amara said. Not every urgent message is terrible. Sometimes it's just diplomatically complicated instead of immediately fatal. My optimistic queen. My dramatic king. They headed back toward the palace, hand in hand, ready to face whatever crisis or opportunity or sheep-related policy debate awaited them. The kingdom was healing. They were healing. And somewhere in the city, in a tavern that smelled like regret and old cheese, someone was probably making another desperate decision that would change everything. But that was a story for another day. For now, the king and queen had work to do. Together. The end.